Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission, as always, is to take these really rigorous sources, the densest research, and basically turn it all into a clear map for you.
And today's source is, well, it's a special one.
It really is. We are getting into one of our most unique deep dives yet. It's all centered on this massive Chef Bible, a compilation of 369 recipes from about 50 nations across 6 continents.
Right. But here's the fascinating twist. We aren't looking at this to learn how to cook.
No, not a...
We're using it to get at the philosophy underneath. I mean, this source isn't a kitchen manual. The author is very explicit, calling it a portrait of humanity's relationship with nourishment.
Portrait. I like that.
It's all about tracking tradition, mapping migration, and really just dissecting that act of turning raw ingredients into something that sustains us.
And that framing just, it immediately shifts the whole focus. You go from calories to culture just like that.
Exactly.
The author who focused entirely on synthesizing the patterns across all 369 of these recipes, and get this, without tasting a single one.
Which I still find incredible.
Me too.
Sure.
They came to this one really profound realization that I think is the core hook for our whole dive today.
And that is?
Food is never only food.
That phrase is everything. It's the key, the aperture for the entire work, isn't it?
It has to be.
Because when we talk about a dish, it doesn't matter if it's goulash or gazpacho or whatever, we're immediately talking about something so much bigger than the ingredients.
Mm-hmm.
It's memory, identity, love, survival,
Celebration, grief.
hope, all made edible. It's such a dense, beautiful concept, and it completely justifies the massive scale of this research.
Okay, so let's unpack some of that density. Let's start with the huge challenge the writer must have faced. I mean, if you're not tasting the food, how do you even begin to translate the reality of flavor into language?
Well, the source material goes right at that.
Yeah.
The difficulty of rendering in language what the tongue knows without words. The author realized they had to pull in literary tools.
Like what?
Things like synesthesia and metaphor to get to what they call a precise imprecision.
A precise imprecision. That's fantastic. Can you give us an example of that?
Sure. I mean, think about trying to describe butter turning into brown butter. It's really hard to nail down that exact moment when it crosses the line from just melted fat to something nutty and toasted. It's a chemical change.
Right.
Or the specific way that fresh mozzarella surrenders its moisture onto a hot pizza. It's not just melting. It requires a certain, almost a loving vocabulary to capture that.
It's like trying to diagram a feeling.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what's really amazing is that by pulling together this huge scope of recipes, the author found something universal.
Foundational.
Yeah, like the hidden physics of cooking.
That's a great way to put it. The source points out that across every single cuisine, whether it's one with thousands of cookbooks or one passed down orally, the same 5 elements dictate everything.
Okay, what are they?
They are the constant importance of fat, the critical power of acid, the alchemy of heat, the necessity of salt, and the magic of time.
Fat, acid, heat, salt, time, the 5 pillars.
The 5 pillars of the kitchen, exactly.
Yeah. So for you, the listener, how does that translate into, useful knowledge?
Well, it gives you immediate context for why a recipe works. A simple vinaigrette. You need fat, the oil, and acid, the vinegar, making a stock. You need heat and time.
So if a dish tastes flat or dull?
It's almost always missing one of those 5 things, or they're out of balance. Add a pinch of salt, maybe a squeeze of lemon juice. That's your acid, and suddenly it comes alive. The source basically proves these aren't just ingredients, they're the governing laws of flavor.
Speaking of governing, the sheer geographical scope here is...
Enormous.
It's wild. You've got, 30 recipes from France and 22 from Japan?
Deeply documented traditions, right?
But then you also have just 3 from Germany or 2 from Ethiopia and Eritrea, so it's a global snapshot, but the resolution is really varied.
And every single one of those entries, no matter how brief, adds to the philosophical weight of the whole thing, especially when you get to the explosive concept of authenticity.
Oh, that's always a minefield in food, isn't it? People want to freeze a dish in time and say, this is the one real version.
Precisely. But this source gives such beautiful, concrete evidence that authenticity is, by its very nature, a moving target. We think of the hamburger as, purely American.
Of course.
But the author reminds us it's as American as it is German. Or think about tikka masala. It belongs to Britain as much as India.
Because these dishes traveled with people, they transformed.
They gained new cultural weight. Trying to pin a single birthplace on a dish like that it's basically futile.
But I could see someone arguing that, saying that sort of I don't know, deflates the importance of cultural ownership. What was the author's take on that?
The authors suggest the exact opposite. It's a celebration of adaptation. It's not about diluting identity. It's about seeing that culinary tradition is a living, breathing thing.
So if the borders don't really matter,
Then the method and the intent become the true definers of the dish.
that is a perfect lead-in to the meaning behind the methods themselves. It's so often the humblest dishes, the ones born from poverty, that become the most beloved.
Yes. The source points this out with things like French fries or the Brazilian cheese bread, pão de queijo. They became essential because they started from thrift.
And you see this meaning in the actual techniques. Let's take something global, like a chicken curry.
Right.
The source spends an incredible amount of time on one single step, cooking the onions until they're deep golden brown.
And it's so specific. The recipe says this takes 20 to 25 minutes. Do not rush. This is the foundation.
25 minutes just on onions. In our world, that feels like an eternity.
And that's the whole philosophical statement. That commitment is the foundation.
Yeah.
The aphorism they pair with it is just perfect. What is used up transforms into what sustains.
Ah.
You're using up your patience, using up time to transform a sharp onion into something rich and sweet that sustains the entire dish. It's the humility of cooking.
Okay, so let's go from the slow, humble curry to something super technical and highly contested. French fries, or frites.
Ah, yes. And you have the whole Belgium versus France origin dispute, but the source, it kind of sidesteps that and focuses on the undisputed technique, the absolute requirement for perfection.
And that technique is it's relentless.
It really is. It starts with precision. The cuts have to be uniform. They have to be rinsed and soaked to get the starch off.
Yeah.
But the real secret weapon,
The double fry.
the double fry method, essential.
So walk us through that.
Okay, so first you have the low temperature fry, around 160 Celsius, 325 Fahrenheit. That's just to cook the potato all the way through. They come out pale, a little limp.
Right. And then you rest them.
You have to let them rest. Let that internal moisture redistribute. And then comes the second act, the high temperature shock. You crank it up to 190 Celsius, 375 Fahrenheit.
And that's just for the outside, to get that crust.
Exactly. It's a final rapid blast of heat that creates that perfect, shatteringly crisp exterior while trapping the fluffy interior. That contrast, the shattering crust and the cloud-like inside, that's the whole point.
Mm-hmm.
And it only happens if you follow the technique to the letter.
We see that same idea, that combination of adaptation and technique, in dishes that were basically invented because of migration. The source talks about spaghetti and meatballs.
Which is a classic Italian-American invention.
Right. Not something you'd really find in Italy.
Not like that, no. In Italy, polpette, the meatballs, were small, served alone, maybe in a broth. But in America, Italian immigrants suddenly had access to all this abundant beef unavailable in the old country.
So they made the meatballs bigger.
Much bigger. And they married them to the spaghetti, and a global classic was born. The aphorism for it is perfect. What adapts to new soil can still honor old roots.
We see a similar story with fried chicken, right? A convergence of Scottish frying techniques and West African spices.
Perfected by enslaved cooks in the American South. The food itself is a historical document. It carries the history of the people who made it. It proves that culinary genius just blossoms when traditions collide.
Let's shift a little and talk about the power of time and temperature, especially in things like pastries and doughs. In so many of these recipes, the most important ingredient is just waiting.
Oh, that tension is captured so beautifully when you contrast two classic Italian desserts. On one hand, you have tiramisu.
Okay.
It requires a minimum of 6 hours, but really overnight is better for the flavors to marry, for the ladyfingers to soften just enough without turning to mush. That waiting is non-negotiable.
So tiramisu is all about patience. What's the opposite?
The cannoli. The cannoli shell is defined by the absolute necessity of speed. You have to fill it right before you eat it, right before serving. Within 15 minutes, ideally. Fill them an hour early and the dish is ruined. It's because the shell has to keep its essential shatter. And that shatter only happens if the dough is rolled very thin, 2 millimeters or less, and isn't allowed to absorb any moisture.
That incredible focus on structure and mandatory technique, you see it everywhere with dumplings, too.
The cultural weight in just the shape of a dumpling is astonishing. For Japanese gyoza, the source mandates 5 to 7 plates, and that specific pan fry, then steam, then crisp technique.
You have to get that perfect crust on the bottom.
You have to. And then you have something like Tibetan or Nepali momos,
Which are even more complex.
a master class.
Yeah.
The traditional goal is 18 pleats. But beyond the skill, there's a ritual. You have to bite a small hole to sip the soup first.
Because there's soup inside.
Exactly. The filling uses aspic, which melts into this rich broth when it's steamed. If you don't sip it, you lose half the experience. The technique is both flavor and ritual.
So we've walked through origins, techniques, philosophy,
Mhm.
all from synthesizing these 369 dishes without ever setting foot in a kitchen. Which I think brings us perfectly to our final section, the synthesis of meaning.
Right, and this is where the work becomes really profound. The author, by focusing only on synthesizing patterns, not tasting, realized they got closer to what taste actually is.
Not the chemical reaction.
Not the chemical reaction on the tongue, but the human meaning of it. They said writing about pho made them feel the weight of hours. The bones simmered. And writing about carbonara, it didn't just teach them the recipe, it made them understand why Romans argue so passionately about the sauce. They absorbed the meaning from the words.
And that realization is kind of a shortcut for you, the listener. By diving into this source, you're absorbing the context, the meaning, without needing years of direct experience. We've synthesized those universal truths, fat, acid, heat, salt, time to basado, just by looking at the patterns.
The final takeaway is that assembling these recipes created something much bigger than a cookbook. In the author's own words, it is not a cookbook, but a portrait of humanity's relationship with nourishment, with tradition, with the irreducible act of transforming raw into cooked, hunger into satisfaction.
And what I loved is that the source material itself was characterized by joy, not work, but the joy of discovery, which is exactly how we feel about sharing these deep dives.
So as a final thought for you to consider, drawing right from the source,
Mm-hmm.
given that the humblest dishes, the ones from poverty, like French fries, oatmeal, pão de queijo,
Mm-hmm.
so often become the most beloved and culturally essential, what does that tell us about the relationship between necessity and tradition in shaping a culture's identity? I mean, if we have infinite resources, does food maybe lose some of its fundamental cultural power?
A question to chew on. Until next time, keep that curious aperture open.